Welcome back, fellow Earthlings. So in the previous video we talked about the crazy beliefs and ideas that my family had. And just for a little bonus, I forgot to mention, my father was also a military chaplain for some time before I was born. And also before I was born, my father also considered taking our family to the Amish community and joining them. And so if they had done that, I would have been born into the Amish culture. So here is the setup. My father had gotten out of the military not that long ago. I'm not really sure how long it had been. But during his time in the military, my family had traveled and had lived out of the country for several years. And then they had returned and he had left the military. And they had moved back home. And they had just gotten good roots in where they were and were getting well acquainted with, they were getting well settled where they were and everything. And things were going relatively well. And then I was born. 3 years later, my father decides that God is calling him to be a missionary. In case you are wondering what a missionary is, it is a religious person who voluntarily leaves their home country and goes to a foreign country with the sole mission of spreading their own religion by making converts, and in my father's case, to eventually build churches. And there is no set amount of time one can be a missionary, but most tend to be missionaries for several years, if not most of their lives, and some even the whole rest of their lives. Which of course means that all the rest of us do not have a say in the matter. We have to go too. Now my oldest brother, he had moved out and gotten married, so he got away scot-free. But the rest of us, we had to go. My sister, she had friends, she did not want to leave. I don't know how my second oldest brother felt about it. He didn't have to go for long. I think he was on his way out as well. But my next oldest brother, was the second youngest. He was quite excited to go. And then me, I was 3 years old. I did not care. I did not know that this was any different. I thought this was perfectly normal. My family had never been to this country, and this country is enormous. We did so much traveling, mostly by train. In fact, I came to fall in love with traveling by train so much that it is by far my favorite mode of transportation, especially traveling overnight, because there is nothing like falling asleep to a rocking train back and forth. But that was mostly within the foreign country itself. We actually had to fly into the foreign country from our home country every time we wanted to get there, because we lived quite a long ways away. But of course, sleeping on an airplane is next to impossible, even for a child. I would sleep on the floor on the airplanes and would have a difficult time. I still don't understand why they don't have bunk beds in airplanes. They have them in trains, why don't they have them in airplanes? Oh well, I don't understand these things. What do I know? Now, the people in this foreign country were kind to us for the most part, but they were also under the false impression that the people from my country were all rich, and that could make things dangerous. For example, one time early on, my father was with a group with my next oldest brother, and I don't know where they were, what they were doing, but they were in a crowded area, and my father fell behind a bit and um, was surrounded in the crowd by a bunch of gypsy girls, and once they crowded around him specifically to keep him from getting to his group, and then ended up actually tackling him and taking him to the ground. And as he was going down, he called out to my brother, and as my brother was on his way to help my father, the girls all got up and ran. And in that very short amount of time, they had already cleaned out everything that was in my father's pockets, in his coat, in his pants, on the coat, on the inside of his winter coat, everything. They cleaned him out entirely in a very short amount of time. Another time we were going on I believe on a tour somewhere, and these two local fellows came up to practice their English on us, because that is actually something people there would do sometimes. If they knew English, they always like to practice with tourists and visitors. And one fellow, well, okay, it was one fellow that came up to my father and was speaking with him, and then my father was at the back of the group again, and the other fellow, we had no idea of his presence at the time, but he opened my father's backpack while he was wearing it and went through it and took whatever he wished and left the backpack open. And we did not know that my father had been robbed until a bit later. Another time, we had a vehicle shipped to us. It had been, I believe it had been donated to us by churches and people who were supporting us back home. And we lived in apartment buildings at the time, so we did not have a parking garage or any form of security, and we were very worried about thieves stealing this vehicle. It was a very nice vehicle as well. Not like fancy, but it was modern. Let's put it that way. It was up to date. For its time, it was a nice vehicle. And my father had invested in and bought an actual garage, several actually, and had stored the vehicle in it, put an alarm system inside of it and everything, and made it very secure. And it was not long before someone used a blowtorch to burn a hole in the side of the garage, because the garage was made completely of metal. And they got inside and broke out from inside, and they managed to get around the alarm system. I think they cut the wires or something. I'm not quite sure. rather fuzzy on the details. So that we did get the police involved with that, and they said they found the vehicle. However, they never got it back to us. And then another time, when we lived on the same apartments we lived in when our vehicle was stolen. We lived on the 7th floor of a 10-story building, very, very high up, with the elevator, and we were not there at the time, fortunately. We were gone. We were visiting back in our home country, I believe, and I do not know how many, but several thieves cut the cables to the elevator of the building and rappelled down the side of the building and broke into our apartment. They knew exactly which apartment we lived in and broke into it. And fortunately, neighbors heard commotion and noise coming from our apartment, and they knew we were gone. And so they called the police, and the police came and they caught the thieves. At least I think they, or did they? It has been a long time. But the police somehow got a hold of my father's computer, which was very important, and but not of extreme importance. And they said that my father could have the computer back if my father agreed to replace all the furniture of the local police station, which he did not agree to do. Now, after having gotten older, I have discovered that there are far worse things that could have happened to us. But fortunately, that is about as bad as it got. And it didn't really happen often at all. Really, we only had 4 or 5 circumstances, issues that we had, but we were never really in danger. But that was very fortunate for our sakes. But unfortunately for yours, we are out of time for today. So if you have enjoyed the video, please hit the like button, subscribe if you have not, and I will see you next week where we will continue this story. Until then, my friends, farewell.